don't run on too much. So moving on, we're going to introduce Monique Charles, who's doing it.
It's the remix.
I like it, the remix. What was Are You Grime part-time? I was talking about your site all the way here. It's alright, I'm from East London, so it's alright. So this is some from the remix, so Dr. Monique Charles. Thank you very much.
Alright. Okay, so yeah, it was Are You Grime part-time, but now it's the This Is East London, the remix. And the reason being is because I was actually going to talk about my book chapter, Are You Grime part-time, which is in this book.
I'm really sorry, I can't hear you because people are talking in the corner.
Sorry guys,
I'm really sorry about that, but I want to hear you.
Okay, yeah, cool. Still going for it. Alright, yeah, so I was going to talk about my book chapter. It was supposed to come out this month. I was waiting for my, the copy you get before it actually goes out. And where is it? I go on to Amazon to see, okay, is the release date changed? It is now October, November, thereabouts. So I thought, let me just take some bits out of it. I can't give you all of it, as it isn't going to be published yet. And I'll just put a bit of a remix on. So I was remixing this yesterday, so we'll see how this goes. All right? Okay, so the book basically was just a bit in bold. It was looking at European whiteness and how it kind of impacts on people throughout the world. They were mainly interested in the South, but hey, I came with Grime, it was novel, they went for it. And I was in that chapter I was talking about the scene as it kind of got into the industry phase. So obviously from the scene into the industry and how it became more white and middle class. And I'll talk about whiteness in a little while as well, because not all whiteness is the same. Okay, so this is a silly question, simply because we're at a kind of hip-hoppy convention. Does everyone know what Grime is? Okay, all right. Well, I did have a little snippet, a 3-minute mix if you needed it, but I think you guys are cool. You guys know what it is, and you probably recognize some of the faces there, so I won't necessarily go into it too much, other than it came out in the early noughties. The people, and what I'm going to be talking to you about as well is some of the data that actually came from my PhD research, because my PhD was actually on Grime. And one of these interesting discussions that have actually been happening, because one of the reasons why I wanted to do it on Grime was because of this moral panic. No, it's not here. But yeah, because of the moral panic, when the politicians started coming out saying it's making killing a fashion accessory, and they're boasting macho idiots and all that sort of stuff. So I thought, no, actually, there's some stuff happening here. It's kind of bubbled up from underground, if you want, as it were. It's made a scene for itself in a way that, well, I suppose it has been done before, but it's not being documented, and actually what is actually happening is not being documented or understood. It's just being demonized from above. And killing as a fashion accessory has a lot to do with Frantz Fanon, horizontal violence, and the policies that these politicians structurally are putting in place. Okay, so Grime started in the early noughties, as you guys already know. As you probably are aware, and you may have read, it's rooted through different genres of music, so it's got links to obviously hip hop and rap, dancehall, bashment. It's got a punk energy to it, also electronic music. Its immediate predecessor is garage or grimy garage. That's kind of how it came to be. And although it was demonized in the early part of the noughties, it had a string of top 10 singles around 2009-2010, whereby Black British artists made a massive contribution to youth culture, and it kind of mainstreamed black culture in the UK. The year 2000, or the noughties, were the period where, let's say, black music or urban music, as it's been rebranded, kind of transitioned from being underground to something that the industry wanted to get their hands on. Okay, so yeah, it became mainstream in the noughties. So you had, because it became mainstream youth culture, you had multi-ethnic youth engaging and consuming grime. Engaging with and consuming grime. So as you guys know, even though I always have to say this, I know you're from East London, but I always have to say this, the people that I interviewed, people said it was from East London, but there were some adamant South Londoners, and I'm not from either area, by the way, but adamant South Londoners that I know so solid, they're the founders, they're the ones that started it, so, so I'm just putting it out there. I have to honour my respondents. So yeah, multi-ethnic youth. And for the most part, when it started out in the scene base, as you lot probably already know, it was in pockets that the government, the same politicians that were condemning, youth, there were the areas that they had forgotten about, or at least where the kind of encroaching neoliberal policies and things being put into place were kind of squeezing people in those particular areas, limiting their life chances and things like that. If any of you lot do have, I don't know if any of you have seen, I've actually got a video up on YouTube about kind of how the scene began and spread and everything else, if you're interested in that. If you just type my name, Monique Charles Grime, chances are the video will be one of the first ones, the YouTube video. Okay. Somebody's Windows isn't genuine, by the way. But you know, Grime came from the pirate radio scene, so it's cool. All right. So in the noughties, as I've already said, the listenership of, let's say, black or urban music increased, and one of the reasons for this was Capital Radio initially and BBC Radio 1. They had a kind of a listenership that was slowly decreasing, and people were kind of sourcing their music from elsewhere. So if we think about the mainstream, I suppose the people that would peddle what music is, in the mainstream charts, the listenership that was going down in those places. And I think, I can't remember the statistic now because it's in the actual book chapter, but I didn't put it on here. But the average listener for Radio 1 was something like 36, and their target audience was something like 25 to 34, I think, no, 18 to 34, I think it was. But the listenership was older, so they wanted to target a younger audience. So what happened was the BBC and Capital FM, they went around looking for pirate radio stations. Obviously, we know like Deja Vu, Vince FM, all these kind of underground stations, but also other kind of community radio stations, as they are called in the community, as opposed to pirate. They went around and started sourcing and handpicking some of these pirate radio DJs for their show to kind of bring some of the underground music in to increase their listenership and also to bring to attract their target audience, which is between 18 and 34. So this process of in 2005, it says there, Capital Radio bought a black radio station, Choice FM, because Choice FM started in 1992. Everyone familiar with Choice FM? It's a London-based radio station, and primarily play black music, but Capital Radio bought it in 2005, and BBC brought out Radio 1, not Radio, sorry, 1 Extra in 2002, and yeah, they were just poaching as they went along. And Grime, all black music was kind of amalgamated, even though they had their individual names, dubstep, garage, etc. They were became labelled urban under one kind of category, which is quite interesting because black artists, no matter how successful they are, still remain urban, whereas others, mainly white artists that may come in as urban, if they become popular enough, they just become pop, even if the sound itself doesn't change. So that's quite an interesting way that the industry works to kind of keep certain people in certain categories and others can flourish. And once you are pop, you can attract more money. You can, have bigger budgets for your artistic output, that sort of thing. Okay, but whilst all this was going on anyway, whilst it was like the real thing for the youth culture in the noughties, it was something that people would listen to and engage with a lot more. Lindner, who is a German academic, who is, I'm not sure if he's still there now, but I think it was at the Institute of British Studies, one of the few research people I could actually find at the time that was actually looking at grime and urban music and black youth culture in the UK. And he found that British youth are still far away of living the multicultural dream. So even though the music is being listened to and consumed and enjoyed, there's still, it's black cultural production that is being consumed and shared and enjoyed. It doesn't improve much for the prospects of the status of black youth. So this is what he found in his particular studies. So what I kind of did here, and it's in the chapter as well, is I started to look at Bell Hooks' concept of eating the other. So I remixed this last night. So what I talk about in the chapter at least is even though I use the concept of eating the other, which is bell hooks is an American academic, they are very much segregated how they live and how they operate in general terms. So it's very black, Latino, white. Here, even the blackest areas of London where grime originated from is not even 50%. So there is definitely a class consciousness, and there are working class white people are largely, and I'm using these terms very loosely now because what is class these days, but working class white people are not considered the same as the middle class. We kind of touched on that earlier. I don't even know if it's come back yet, but not considered the same as middle class or respectable whiteness. So being working class, and especially if you have close proximity to multi-ethnic, other people from other backgrounds, your white status is slightly diminished. But you live the grimy life, so you engage with it very much so. So even though it's considered a black musical form and it's drawn largely from black music and black cultural practices, the scene was multi-ethnic. Once the industry got involved, white middle class youth would started to engage more with grime, and this caused problems. And there were news articles. I think Platt is in there somewhere, one of the other slides, talking about it's the hijacking of working class culture. I went to some events as well for my PhD research, and they were particularly concerned. It was an event organised by Black British Music, which is a small organisation that promotes Black British music and wants to make sure that it is documented. They had a meeting, or they had a conference where they were discussing, okay, this is the music we make, we're not really benefiting from it. Outsiders are coming in and taking our music, hence the kind of eating the other concept. So you find something that's really good and you're quite happy to take the kind of cultural elements out, but you're not really interested in the people. So that event took place at the University of the Arts. And some of the findings that they had was, even once the industry such as the BBC or Capital Extra did find DJs and bring them into their organisations, the DJs themselves were unable to bring music that they would acquire through underground means to the radio station. It would have to be authorised by somebody obviously in the department, or a record label would have to back it before they could play it. So it's almost taking the cultural agency away from the underground as well. So this is one of the things that they were talking about there. So although, especially now we've got like the Big Nasty Show, we've got the Girls of Grime, I think that's still kind of bubbling under the surface on social media, but there is a lot of kind of crossover. People have had commercial success, obviously Stormzy, Wiley, that sort of thing. So some people have benefited from this, economically, got a lot of publicity from it. However, from the people that I interviewed, and this is working class black and white, many felt that this was a violent act that was being done to them by the industry, because commercial grime is not considered, they don't really call it grime now. I'm calling it grime for the sake of it now, but they don't call it grime. It's going to have other names, or then they move on to road rap, or they move on to drill, that sort of thing. So I kind of touched on this already. So the panelists at that event that I went to found that, again, the industry, they were primarily concerned with making money. How can we commodify this? How can we make money from this? Basically the authority, who had the authority as to what was good enough, actually moved from outside the scene. So I've kind of already talked about that already. All right, so the actual process of outsiders now being able to determine which songs make it to the radio, or if a song does make it to the radio, it has to go through an official body which is outside of the scene, actually makes mainstream radio complicit in this kind of institutionalization process of black cultural production, black and working class cultural production, and makes them complicit. Even though they've been poached from these places themselves, they actually become complicit in this process, willingly or otherwise. So the power base moves outside of the subculture. But the people that I interviewed as well, they were quite aware of, they openly acknowledged racism, and it's quite interesting. Earlier, I think we were talking about what was it? Either you're an observer or you're actually, you know, immersed into the scene itself. I don't know if it was my social coordinates, the fact that I'm a woman, the fact that I'm black, that people felt more comfortable to say things to me. But they were quite open and saying, you know, the industry, it's a racist industry. Even when it comes to nightclubs and stuff, they want our music. They don't want us there. They don't want me to play the music. I can't get work. That sort of thing. So lots of things are happening. So we've kind of talked about 696 already. So even though we've had the kind of institutionalization of institutionalization of grime through like commercial radio, kind of taking DJs from pirate radio. You also had 696 that kind of got involved, which is the Met Police at the time, which they had a risk assessment form, which is, I suppose it's the, let's just say the CBO is censorship 2.0 and 696 was the first version. So at that time it was still very much an embedded scene. People were still trying to go out to raves and consume the music in public places. 696 was a risk assessment form set out by the Met Police that said, well, okay, your artist needs to fill out this form. We need to know the ethnic makeup of the people that are going to be attending. And then there was outcry about that. And then it was, okay, well, what type of music is it? You know, music that has an MC with a backing track is considered more dangerous. So you're still kind of targeting the same sort of people. So the police have always been very much in, you know, on particular groups of people and their cultural production. And what actually happens, or what my research has found, is this kind of intervention actually, well, it kills cultural chants. It actually it is very damaging to cultural chants. Some artists were blocked once they actually got into the industry. So once it kind of really mainstreamed, you had Tinchy Striders #1, 2009, 2010. Not so much Rich 32's Tractor, but you had you know, Chip crossing over. There were lots of crossing over at the time. The sound started to change quite a bit, and they were no longer able to do what they wanted to do per se. But because of how grime came to be, basically on its own terms, and it came alongside the internet, it found its own ways to kind of make itself heard. So, you know, Wiley today will make a commercial track because he knows how to do that, but he's still doing the underground stuff. So there's a lot of straddling the line with a lot of the grime artists coming up. That came up. Sorry, I'm still stuck in my research, like however long ago. Okay, so when I was interviewing some of the white respondents, and these respondents who I have anonymized, they were both from working class areas, living, breathing that grimy life. And they noticed, they would say, nowadays there are people who you wouldn't expect to be into grime. You'd think they were more like into indie music, but they're grime fans. And so even though we kind of talked around that a bit, research has shown that indie fans tend to be quite middle class. And one of the things that McCullough, Stewart, Lovegreen, Hollingworth and Williams found is middle class youth have an option to kind of dip into subculture and dip out, you know, however they feel. Whereas if you are living that grimy life, that is your life. That is. I wouldn't necessarily say as far as say who you are, but that expression is a real authentic expression. And so even though the scene expanded, I think the kind of tension between this sounds really interesting, I want to partake in it, and this is my authentic experience that I'm expressing, caused problems, which is why it kind of came up in various like newspaper or magazine articles, especially for the scene-based magazines. One person actually, sorry, the second person, which is it Martin? Okay, the second person here was an avid grime fan, but they're actually from the US. And so their relationship was a bit different. So they were kind of accessing a lot of stuff online. And he was a white respondent as well. But he actually noticed himself that once it had mainstreamed, black or working class, black and white working class or multi-ethnic working class youth followed the road rap trajectory, whereas you know, the main, that was what appeals to the mainstream. The middle class were kind of going for that. And if you were a white MC, unless you were embedded in the culture, living that grimy life, like K-Coke, for example, then you would go the commercial route. You couldn't really spit about, you know, all the stuff you're doing. You wouldn't be taken seriously, that kind of thing. So that's what they found there. So, I kind of spoke about this. This is what happens when you remix at the last minute, but anyway. So, yeah, class has a significant impact on subcultural practices for those living in diverse and inclusive communities. And as I've kind of touched on already, you know, street or road culture is very much intertwined with grime. It's rooted in embedded experiential knowledge of the inner city, and it's a black influenced subculture within the mainstream British youth culture. It's very much working class subcultural form. Now, even though it is very, I suppose I kind of touched on the fact that not all whiteness is the same. There were some white people that I actually interviewed that didn't live nearby, but those respondents actually moved from wherever they were to become part of the scene. And in becoming part of the scene and engaging and DJing and actually interacting, there was no issue. The issue was mainly those who wouldn't engage with the communities at all and would just, you know, just enjoy the culture or the sonic exploration, if you want to call it that. So as I've said, the majority of the respondents that I interviewed, they grew up in London inner cities. So it was inclusive in nature. Like I said, even the blackest areas of, you know, the blackest boroughs are not even 50% black. So, you know, it goes without saying. And the point I made before, white working class living in city areas partake just as much, and they too are vilified by the middle classes, the upper classes. So, you know, turn of the 2000s, the Burberry hat was, you know, demonized, chavs, all that sort of stuff, and they were racialized and animalized as well. Nayak's work looks at that as well, how white working class can be othered, and even in areas where it's not diverse, white working class youth are still quite vilified or demonized as well by wider British culture. Okay, so one of the things that Linda found, which is the same German academic I spoke about before, was part of the attraction for white youth to black music culture may have to do with, I suppose, a typical adolescent kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say phase, but it's something that young people go through when they're kind of testing boundaries with their parents, or where they're trying to find out their identity and they're kind of exploring different things, which could explain why somebody who isn't embedded in that particular grimy life would maybe try indie, would maybe try different things, because you know you're trying to find your identity. And some people I actually spoke to said, well, you know, it's a bit you know, Pink Floyd, it's a bit like, no, like that's my dad's music, you know. So you know, you're trying to find something, and are genuinely attracted. But what happens, as I've kind of touched on before, is because those living the grimy life, the cultural production is intertwined with their authenticity and who they are, it can cause tension. And I found in my research that there was kind of some policing going on. People felt threatened by unknown. If you were a known white person, that was okay, but if you were an unknown white person, are you coming to just kind of take my genuine cultural production? So that was something that happened, something that kind of came up in the research as well. But it's also worth considering that you know, black is synonymous with cool, and youth is also synonymous with cool. So you know, it all kind of amalgamates somewhere in the middle from tween up until whenever, and then you know, so it's something that kind of has happened. It's happened with ska. And the mods, it's happened with, you know, chanting down Babylon, you know, it's just some punky reggae, all of it kind of, it's just something that's so just kind of shifting gears a bit. So we've kind of looked at, I suppose, how industry got involved, the tensions between, you know, with race in particular. I didn't really touch on class that much, not class, gender that much here, but if we look at what is actually happening, culture aside, I got this yesterday. More than 80 people now have died in violent circumstances in the capital so far. That's from Barnes. That was an article in the Independent. Somebody got dumped off a moped yesterday. I was just anyway. But you know, knife crime is not it doesn't only affect black youth, but it is synonymous with them. That is one of the narratives that well, black youth and criminality has been peddled since the Black Mugger, Stuart Hall, and there are issues of class and horizontal violence, which also links back to the structural structural things that politicians put in place, as well as individual agency. You can't completely blame politicians for everything, although I don't mind. And so there have been discussions about to treat youth violence as a public health issue, not a criminal issue, and I think it's partly treated as a criminal issue, partly because of class, partly because of race as well. But I don't know if you've heard of the Forefront Project. That's it. Temi Noir has been kind of advocating for this for quite some time, and it's now starting to get into more public consciousness, public discourse, because of the spate of stabbings that have actually happened. And there is this kind of antagonistic relationship between consumers of the commodified culture in particular that have no interest or awareness or understanding of the problems that the host culture experience, or they romanticize them. So I did have somebody who didn't live near, who lived somewhere else in England and did move down and eventually became part of the scene. But at first it was like, it's really it's fascinating, they live such a completely different life. It was like the spectacle. It was almost like, I can assume maybe like watching Scarface or playing Grand Theft Auto. It was kind of this kind of romanticized kind of thing. So, but he moved, became part of the scene, and I wouldn't necessarily say full on lived the grimy life, but made real genuine connections with people in the scene. And there's no issue from my interviews. I think people have had problems where there's no engagement with the scene. It's just the taking of the culture. You become a big DJ and you're not engaging with the culture too. So that was the issue there. So that's kind of what I was talking about, and I thought, well, let me just add a little bit of a remix here. So let's see how this goes. Do you know this beat? Okay, alright. So I just thought I'd be a bit dramatic because I like to be dramatic sometimes. But this is East London, right? And in August, in April, let me take that before. So in August, I said August again because I'm not concentrating. Trying to be flashy, isn't it? Alright, anyway, yeah, so in April I went to go see Lady Lejour. She's in the middle there, you can't necessarily see her clearly, but she's the one in the camouflage hat. She did just a random pop-up performance of her Black Panther in Stratford. And I went down to see, lots of people went down to see, and something really unexpected and interesting kind of happened, which is almost a visual representation of what I'm trying to get at here with my remix, so hopefully it will work. But yeah, so this is East London. So I've got two videos here that I ended up taking because I was so fascinated. So here, I don't know if you can see, but at the beginning of the video, you see some people dancing in the middle, just to some, bash or whatever. And there's people walking at the back with placards. I don't know if you can see them. I think I got some leaflets from them afterwards, and they were, I think it was like a Pentecostal church. It was a Pentecostal church, and they had placards saying, was it something like lives, not knives. So they were protesting against the gun crime and everything that's been happening, the whole spate of, stabbing, gun crime, sorry. Well, there have been some gun crimes as well, but, the violent crime that's been happening in the community. And then you have, Lady Lejour had stopped performing by this time, people just enjoying the music and were oblivious to the protest that was going on across the back. So I thought, this is East London, literally like the video of This Is America, with all this stuff going on in the background. Unfortunately, I didn't think to dance as it was happening. Yeah, so, and this is another video where I kind of zoomed in a bit more. So this guy here, he's actually in the Black Panther video. I think he's a friend of Lady Lejour, and so he's got the sound stuff. So she's milling around. And in the back, and it's completely two separate things happening at the same time. So, and someone is a little flowing me. But yeah, so that's it. That's the remix.
In the interest of time, I think we'll do what we did last time. So if I introduce James and then we'll do combined Q&A at the end. I'll let you switch over.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank
You're gonna,
you very much. So I'll introduce James McNally. I can see you're now officially listed to the University of Bristol.